Today on our 2017 Jeep Cherokee, we're going to be taking a look at showing you how to install the Roadmaster Diode 7 Wire to 6 Wire Flexo-Coil wiring kit, part number RM-15267. Now our Roadmaster Diode kit is going to allow us to use our RV's taillights, brake lights, and turn signals on our vehicle so that we can flat tow it safely down the road. To begin our installation, we're going to start on our passenger side here, and we're going to need to remove the two fasteners holding our taillight in place. Now I'm going to be using a T30 Torx Bit to remove those. Now we're just going to kind of give our taillight a good wiggle around to loosen it up a little bit, and then we're going to pull straight back, which will release these tabs that are holding it in place. Now I'm going to disconnect my socket from my taillight. There's going to be a little button right here. If we push down on it, we'll be able to pull the plug out. And I'm going to pull some of this sheathing back so I can see the wire that's underneath it. Now that we have some of the sheathing pulled back, we're going to go ahead and plug our light back in, and we're going to need to have someone run the taillights for us so we can start testing our wires. With our taillight on, we're going to need to test each one of our wires here and see which one is the correct circuit for our taillights. And it looks like it's going to be the white wire with the gray stripe on it. Now we're going to need to write that down or remember it. We now have our right turn signal going, and we're going to need to find the wire that is controlling our turn signal. So it looks like it's going to be our white wire with the yellow stripe, which is going to be right next to our gray and white wire. And that's going to be for our right turn signal, and we're going to need to remember or write that down as well. Now that we have our wires identified, I'm going to go ahead and remove my taillight. That way I have a little bit more room to work with. Now we're going to come to our two wires that we identified. We'll go ahead and start with the white and yellow wire. Now I'm going to cut this in half, just a little bit away from my connector, and I'm going to strip back both ends. Now since this is rather small wire, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fold my wire in half. That way it has a little bit more to bite onto when I put my connector in place. So I'm going to take my diode, and they're going to have my connectors already installed. Now what we're going to make sure is that the out part of the diode is going to be going towards the socket on our taillights. So we can take the out terminal, and we're going to apply it to the end that's connected to the taillight socket, and we'll crimp it in place. We'll give it a quick tug to make sure that it's secure. Now on the other end, we're going to take one of the terminals from the inside of our diode, and we're going to crimp it onto that end of our wire. So we're going to go ahead and plug our diode in just to keep track of all the wires here. And we'll be coming back to this other terminal here in a little bit. So we're going to bring our attention to the gray and white wire, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut that wire in half and grab another diode and set it up just like this. So if we take the 4-pole wire that's provided in our kit, we're going to need to separate each one of these wires. Now you can just grab them and pull them apart, or if you need to, you can get a pair of cutters or a utility knife. You just want to be very careful not to cut the wire itself. So you just want to split these wires apart, and you want to give yourself a decent amount of room, but you don't need to do the whole length of wire. Now we're really mainly going to be focusing on our green and brown wire here, and I'm going to strip back both ends. Now if we come back to the diode that's connected to our white and yellow wire, that's going to be for our brake light signal, which that's what our green wire is going to be for. So I'm going to take the terminal off of the inside of my diode, and I'm going to crimp it onto my green wire. Now with that connection made, I can go ahead and plug it back into my diode, and the remaining diode that needs the other terminal put in place, that's going to be going onto the brown wire, and we can put it back on the diode. Now we're going to need to get the rest of our wire along with the white wire and yellow wire towards the top, down through the body and out the bottom of the bumper, so we can get over to the other side of our taillights. So I'm going to be using a piece of Airline tube that I had laying around, and that's going to help me get my wire down. I'm going to feed this down till I can reach it at the bottom of my bumper, and then I can attach my wire and pull it down. Just going to put a little bit of electrical tape on the end of my air hose here and attach my wire. That way when I start pulling, I won't lose it. I'm going to start pulling my wire down and help feeding it through. I want to make sure that we get all the excess wire out. So this is where all my wires came out, and I'm actually going to leave my Airline tube attached, and I'm going to start routing my wire from the passenger side here over to the driver's side. Now you just want to stay away from any heat sources like the exhaust or any moving parts, but we are going to need to get access to the driver's side tail light. So I'm going to go behind my heat shield, up and over the bumper beam. It will help protect my wires from any heat or any moving parts. Again, you want to pull all the excess wire over and make sure that you don't have any kinks or anything stuck. We're going to remove the driver's side taillight now. And again, I'm going to be using a T30 Torx Bit to remove the 2 fasteners. Disconnect the connector, and then we're going to need to test our taillights again. So we'll go ahead and pull this sheathing back. So I'm going to go ahead and check these wires to see which one's my taillight signal. Looks like the white wire with the yellow stripe is going to be our taillight signal. Now we're going to write that down and remember that as well. Now we're going to turn our turn signal on, and we're going to need to check and see which wire is our turn signal wire. Looks like the white wire with the green stripe is going to be our turn signal. Now we're going to need to remember that one too. Now that we know which wires are which, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect my connector again, set my taillight aside. I'm going to feed an Airline tube down the body, and I'm going to pull the wires up. Now I'm going to take the loop where my brown and green wire all the way to where they start to come back together. I'm going to take that loop here, and I'm going to tape it to the end of my Airline tube. That way I can pull up all the wires at once. So now we have it up towards the top. I'm going to take my yellow and white wires and all the excess slack out. Now we're going to focus on our brake and turn signal wire first, and if you remember, that's the white and green wire. Now we're going to do the same thing we did on the other side. We're going to cut this in half and strip back both ends. I'm going to go ahead and fold our wire in half to give our connector a little bit more to bite onto. And again, we're going to take our terminals off of our diode and crimp them into place. Now we're going to go ahead and put the outside of our diode going towards the socket, and then we can plug in the other side of our diode to the other end of the in. Now we're going to take the end of our yellow wire, and that's where the third terminal from our diode is going to go. Now for our other wire, we are going to start out doing the same thing. We're going to cut it in half, our yellow and white wire. That's going to be for our tail lights. So we can go ahead and cut it in half and strip back both ends. Now we should have one more diode that's going to be 2 blue terminals and 1 yellow terminal. Well, we're going to focus right now to the out, and again, the terminal for the out diode is going to be going to the one closest to our taillight socket. The other blue terminal is going to go on to the other end of the wire that we just stripped back. So I'm going to go ahead and plug the out on my diode as well as the one inside. I'm going to go ahead and pull the yellow terminal off my diode, and we're going to bring our attention to the brown wire. Our brown wire, if you remember, it is connected to our other side of our taillight circuit. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the end that's closest to the other side and farthest away from where our 4 wires come together. So we're going to take up as much slack as we can, and we're going to cut it in half pretty far away from where our 4 wires come together, and we're going to strip both ends. Now we're going to twist these wires together, and that's the reason for the larger terminal, the yellow one that's on our diode. So we're going to put both wires into the end of our terminal, and we'll crimp it into place. Now with our brown wire connected, we can go ahead and plug it into the other terminal on our diode. Now we should have 1 wire left, and that's going to be our ground wire. Now I'm going to give myself a little bit of slack, but we don't need all this white wire here since we're going to be grounding it. So I'm going to cut the end off, and then strip it back. And then I'm going to take the provided ring terminal in our kit, and I'm going to crimp it into place. I'm going to take a self-tapping screw, and I'm going to screw it in right behind my taillight housing, and that's where my ground's going to be secured at. Now we do have some double-sided tape on the back of our diodes that if we want to, we can stick them to any surface. Now, in my case, I'm going to be taking a zip tie, and I'm going to zip tie my diodes together to make it a little bit easier once I start putting everything back in place and won't take up so much room. Before I put my taillights back in place, I'm going to put a little bit of dielectric grease in my connector. Now if you need some of this, you can pick some up on our website using part number 11755. So we can plug our connector in, making sure it locks into place. Then we just line up the tabs on our taillight, and we can secure it down. Now we're going to need to run our 4-pole wire all the way to the front of our vehicle. Everybody's going to do it a little bit differently, but I just want to mention you want to stay away from heat sources like your exhaust or any moving parts like your axle or suspension components. So I'm going to get this done, and then I'll show you how I routed it. So I ran my wire, I went over my rear axle here, zip tying it to the subframe, went over, then I came down and went underneath my skid plate here, following it down, coming underneath this skid plate, zip tying it along the way. Finally I came out, zip tied it here, went underneath my skid plate again, came up to my frame, zip tied it in a few places, and then I ran my wire underneath my bumper, and then I had it coming out right here. Now I'm going to need to find a spot to mount my electrical connector. So we're going to need to separate our wires just like we did at the back. So we're going to pull apart each one of the wires so we have a little bit of room to work with. Now we have a little bit of extra wire, so I'm going to pull my wire back and separate them pretty close to the vehicle so we don't have all this excess. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of room, but I'm going to cut my wires and cut the excess off. I'll go ahead and strip back the ends of our wires. Now before I start attaching my wires to my plug, I'm going to take my dust cover, I'm going to slide it over my wires. That way it'll be there once I have everything wired up. And then I'm also going to take my bracket and I'm going to slide it over my wires because we're going to have to attach this from the back side. So we can go and grab our socket, and we're going to start with the terminal that has a GD, and that's going to be for our ground. So we're going to take our white wire, and if the set screws on your socket aren't already loosened, you're going to need to loosen the set screws, and you're going to insert the white wire into the GD terminal, and then we're going to tighten it down. Now we can bring our attention to the next one, which is going to say LT. That's going to be for left turn. So we're going to take our yellow wire, and we're going to put it in there and tighten down the set screw. The next one's going to be RT, which is going to be right turn. So we're going to take our green wire and insert it into that terminal and tighten down the set screw. Finally, we should have one wire left, which is going to be our brown wire. Now we're going to need to find the terminal that says TM, which is for trailer marker or our tail lights. So we can take our brown wire and we can tighten down the set screw. With all that wired up, I'm going to slip my dust cover over the back. I'm actually going to get a little bit of electrical tape to help secure it and keep out some of the moisture and debris. Now we're going to need to mount our electrical connector, and I'm going to mount it right to the bottom of our license plate because it has some nice sturdy plastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a marker, and using my mount as a template, I'm going to put it about where I want it to sit. I'm going to mark on the bottom here where I'm going to need to drill. So go ahead and drill out the holes we marked. I can come back and get ready to put my hardware in place. So I got a couple screws and washers that I had laying around that I'm going to use to mount this. So I'm going to come from the top. I'm going to drop my screws down into place. And I can take my bracket, line up the holes, and then I can secure it down with the nut. Now they do provide us with a couple screws and locking nuts to secure our socket to the mount. So I'll be using the provided screws and lock nuts that they have in our kit to secure the socket to the mount itself. I'm going to come back using a Phillips screwdriver and a 3/8 wrench to tighten up my hardware. So here I have my tester ups, and we're going to test our lights to make sure everything is working properly. So if I turn the lights on my tester to simulate my RV having the headlights turned on, we can see that the tail lights work. If I were to turn on my left turn signal, we can see that it works. And the right turn signal, looks like everything's working properly, so we're ready to hit the road. And that'll finish up our look at the Roadmaster Diode 7 Wire to 6 Wire Flexo-Coil wiring kit, part number RM-15267 on our 2017 Jeep Cherokee.
Click the link below to shop, learn more, or visit us at etrailer.com.